Hello everyone, today in this video we will be discussing the editorial page analysis of the Indian Express newspaper. Today is July 17th, 2020. There are 4 articles to be discussed in this page. First article is regarding the visa banned by the US government and how it affected them, and they have taken back the decision. And second article is on the trade data, which is declining day by day, the slump in the trade data. And third article is on Assam floods, who is responsible for this. Fourth article is the diversity and nonce, means due to the pandemic effect, the syllabus for different education sectors, means schools and different classes, have been reduced. What is the impact of that? Before I discuss, I am Prashanth. I welcome you all to Wifisestudykaro. If you are new to my channel, I request you all to subscribe so that you will not miss any further updates. This first article is on blessings of visa gods. The author says that the decision which was taken back by the Trump government as a blessing by Chilkur Balaji god. So what this article says, that Trump revokes diktat, means the rule which he has given earlier, but why India must get worked up on declining opportunity for cash. So what this author says is that to ensure a Balaji blessing that have supplemented by the combined power of America's Ivy League institutions and the information technology behemoths. Behemoths means big companies, or the one who is in rule, who had together managed to get US President Donald Trump to rescind his directive that when an American university switches to online courses, that is, international students must go home to their country of origin and complete their education online. There are so many universities and companies successfully protested due to this move, and the universities, US companies make a lot of money by hiring the imported talent. According to the US Department of Commerce estimate that around 45 billions of is earned through international student fee, and UK study showed that British universities could lose anywhere up to 19 billion if intake of international students falls sharply. So due to this, the educational institutions from different universities and countries, that Canada, Australia, New Zealand and Singapore, have become increasingly dependent on tuition fees earned from foreign students, and Indians are becoming the single largest group among them. So if you look into this aspect, there are around 10 to 13 billion annually as a tuition fees we pay as Indians, and the Reserve Bank of India provided a data under the LRS scheme, that is liberalized remittance scheme, of the foreign exchange remitted overseas by the Indian national residents in India. The annual average forex outflow had risen from around 1.07 billion in 2009 to 14 to around 11 billion in 2014 to 2020. So what it says is that the policy elite in the developing world, from being where talent had been migrating out to the developed world, has consistently ignored Bhagwati's brain drain tax proposal. Both Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Modi have referred to as overseas India as brain bank on whom India can draw for its own development. However, the fact is that this so-called brain bank has in fact been making a huge financial and intellectual deposits into the host country, increasing the drain without appreciable returns for the home country. In around 1970s and 80s, even into 1990s, most of the Indian migrants to developed countries came from the middle class, mainly from upper caste. However, the past decade, that is a couple of decades, the out migrants have come from all classes. The demand for US visa for access of educational and employment opportunities of English speaking development over world comes as much as the middle class as it does from the upper class families as well. So the outmigration of educated and skilled Indians that is not balanced by the return flow of income, knowledge, investment, talent constitutes both the brain drain of cash of the brain power. So due to this, in the early 2000s, when India rise was viewed on a positive light, many have hoped that like in the East Asian communities in the US, Japanese, Koreans and Chinese, Indians in the US would also return home and invest in India and contribute to the home country development. However, for a variety of reasons, this expectation is yet to be Overseas Indians are quite happy to chant Modi Modi mantra in New York, London, Houston and around the world. But when it comes, it would be interesting to see how many of those who attend Modi's rallies abroad have decided to return home to contribute India's Atmanirbhar Bharat. Rather, the number of Indians seeking blessings of visa God is only increasing by the year that the non-resident Indian is becoming non-returning India. So this article is saying that most of them have been going abroad, but they are not returning, they are not contributing to the nation, they are becoming brain drain, but they are not investing in the nation's economic interest and also contribution to the nation. The next article is on a demand problem. Trade data highlights a slump. Localized lockdowns, self-imposed restrictions could curtail it further. The largest trade data released by the Ministry of Commerce paints a worrying picture. While the contraction in the exports observed over the past few months appears to be easing slowly, the implications of the continuing deep contraction in imports on the end demand are disquieting. A growing challenge between export and import growth had also led to India registering a trade supply of nearly 800 million in June. This is the first time that almost 2 decades the country had registered a trade surplus. However, this indicative not of the robust turnaround in the export but of the collapse in the domestic demand, despite the easing of restrictions on domestic activities during the unlocking phase. At an aggregate level of India's merchandise export continues to witness an upward swing, with the pace of contraction falling of around 12.4% in June from 36.2% in May and 60% in April. A closer look at the data reveals that the export of items such as iron ore, drugs, pharmaceuticals, chemicals and various agricultural saw an expansion in June. However, 18 to 30 major export product categories contracted in June, including some labor-intensive ones such as gems and jewelry, leather and textiles. Though some of these sectors have seen the healthy recovery from April, the upswing in the export could be indicative of the faster recovery of India's export. Restrictions on economic activities in some of these countries had eased earlier, and probably because of the rush by the Indian exports to ship out the orders meet their seasonal deadline. On the other hand, imports continue to remain deep in negative territory, contracting around 47.6% in June as compared to decline of 52.4% in May. Now this is regarding the decline of some of the goods due to the lockdown effect. And as the economic activities around the world will take time to return to normalcy, India's export will take time to reach the pre-COVID levels. It seems that the chasm between the exports and imports would persist given the plateauing of post-lockdown spurt in demand or production of the account on the spread of infection, the continuing localized lockdown and the self-imposing restrictions in the household. This is regarding the demand problem. Due to the lockdown, it has affected the trade, import and export operations. That's why there is some surplus, decline and fall of these trade. The next article is on the Assam floods. Who is responsible? A state of deluge. Assam flood problems cannot be entirely blamed on the vagaries in situations of the nature. It needs to jettison outmoded flood controls. It's a crucial. In the last week of April, Assam Chief Minister Sarbananda Sonowal took a stock of the state's flood preparedness. Less than a month later, river Brahmaputra swelled up and had been in a spate ever since. In spite of CM's directives, and state administration seem that to have been caught unawares. At least 65 people have lost their lives, and more than 3.5 lakh people in 26 district states have been affected. Nearly 90% of the Kaziranga National Park is reportedly submerged. Floods are the recurrent features during the monsoon in Assam. In fact, the ecologists point out that the floodwater have historically rejuvenated croplands and fertilized soil in the state's alluvial areas. But it's also a fact that more than 60 years, the center and state government have not found to contain the toll taken by the raging waters. The state have primarily relied on embankments to control floods. These flood control measures was introduced in Assam in early 1950s when hydrology of most Indian rivers, including Brahmaputra, was poorly understood. Today, there is a substantial amount of scholarly work that has to be highlighted. The problem of using large walls to check Brahmaputra's flow. The river changes course frequently, and it's virtually impossible to contain it within embankments. Moreover, the pressure of the surging water takes a toll on these walls, and they need constant reinforcement. By all accounts, that hasn't happened in Assam. Several of the state's embankments were reportedly breached by the flood this year. Large parts of Guwahati are underwater. The city has been getting flooded during the monsoon since the past years. It is shaped like a bowl, does make it susceptible to waterlogging, but the documentary of Mission Flood Control Guwahati, a program of the Assam government and the city's Metropolitan Development Authority, correctly points out that unplanned expansion of the city has led to severe encroachments in wetlands, low-lying areas, hills, and shrinking of the forest covers. The denuded hills and loss of wetlands leads to artificial floods. The documents also notes that the rainwater from Meghalaya and surrounding hills often causes a flash floods in Guwahati. However, recognition of the problem has not led to meaningful conversation between the two states on the flood control. In fact, the authorities in all the states that share the Brahmaputra basin need and urgently put their heads together to resolve the perennial problem of the floods in Assam. This is regarding how they have to take the measures to stop the floods in coming future. The next article is a very interesting article, Diversity and Nonce. Pandemic underlines the need for multiple perspectives. Syllabi educators must take note. Many of the words or the phrases used to describe what we are going through have been emptied and of all meaning, unprecedented, and for instance no longer conveys what we have been experiencing. An enormous human tragedy threatening the survival of millions often leaves us numb and helpless. To add this, responses from those positions of power, our decision makers, have been baffling, to say at least. So these including the dropping chapters of environment, evolution, reproduction, mathematical reasoning, federalism, popular movements, gender, caste, citizenship, and secular, among others. The logic behind such expulsion is opaque, to say the least. Each of these themes is particularly crucial for those in search of lasting resolutions to the pandemic and the post-pandemic world at a variety of levels, ranging from local to national global. Understanding the connections and linkage as well as comprehensiveness of the institutional structures and the process are likely be a critical factor. So due to the expulsion of these chapters, there is always a lost in the process ability to understand some of the most crucial issues that impact our daily lives and have unprecedented long-term consequences. In absence of a recent understanding of these issues, learners will probably come to rely increasingly on WhatsApp universities with its quick and rapid-fire resolutions, often short-lived and erroneous of these complex issues. We also need a factor in the immense digital divide that operates with the formal education and elsewhere. In such situation, the least privileged learners who are most vulnerable will have little or no opportunity to engage with the topics that have been declared an optional from the point of view of evolution. This is surely a matter of serious concern. This pandemic has brought lessons and brought many of us often conflicting the difficult ones. It has also made aware and the urgency of developing critical understanding, a scientific temper, the ability to view situations from multiple perspectives. Many of the chapters that have been brushed under the carpet provide windows into just these possibilities, encouraging the learners to grapple with complex, even complicated situations, rejecting simplicity pat slogan-like formulations, equipping learners with these opportunities essential in such situations. These themes are exclusive in other way, as well as enabling the learners to appreciate the diversity and differences are crucial for development of holistic understanding. So any practices of that it lays down will have a long-term far-reaching chain effect unless these are actively and systematically interrogated. So nevertheless, till such time these are reformed and rethought, they are remain in a benchmark for teachers or learners or parents or employees. That is what it is important to ensure that these include rather than exclude to the themes that are now being dropped. Also, it is true that the books on which the CBSE examination rely are now nearly a decade and a half old, and they need to be updated and revised carefully to take into account of the dynamic world and equip learners to address it. However, this is a task that requires the dialogue and patience, even if it proves time consuming. As such, it needs to be undertaken carefully rather than as an ad hoc manner. The problem with ad hoc measures is that they often acquire certain legitimacy and permanence, sometimes because of inertia, on other occasions for other reasons. So in this article it clearly says that revamping or curtailing some of the subjects or some of the chapters from the different subjects will not affect, but it will affect the long-term process. In order that they need to think, due to the diversity and due to pandemic underlines need for multiple perspective, and syllabi and educators must take note on these aspects. That's the end of article discussion of the Indian Express editorial. If you want to see the discussion of the Hindu editorial page, I will give you a link in the description. Just go and hit that link so that you will be directed to that discussion. Thank you. Have a great day.